Hello, Joe Rogan, everyone is missing. How subjects are being framed in the news media to measure and to maintain self-added collusions with itself about breaching method at countries A through Z. Identities of sciences, identities of practicality or integrity that are bridged, styles of needing to pretend other. So it's important to note there's a difference of how Americans are prevented due processes on a mass scale. They have other communicated for America's founders than they communicated, and they refer to us. They refer to themselves plural as James Madison singular. So it would be not changed as it stayed. And they went then and got George Washington counter-extorted and agreeing to help and to use that plan of James Madison, the founders behind him, and that leverage to counter-extort within more than 13 colonies that themselves divided. And there was slavery entrenched. No, before America's founders were born, northern colonies, southern colonies. This is not clear because there were hyper-criminally foreign influenced campuses. And it forced church and persuade people, then it showed them they had to do. They already blamed other things, other themselves, where the breaching method was. Shows them how to hide that. But by keeping that, in other words, they have all on a mass scale. They have scams that prevent us mandated law. They prevent us due process. And while they're stacking predicate acts with facts, fake things, as collusion/S, only capable of it at sciences A through Z, at databases because of our database relativity since before computers per method/S. And the /S part is within and as countries A through Z. The human species body of individual bodies now as systems tactilitarian with relative to its identity of hyperrelativity to us, to that identity that has showing us it's projecting why and how there are other species bodies with two eyes. So it's projecting to us. It's not us nor them, but it's all things anyway. That identity is important to pay attention to its communications to us. Like where and how we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time, with more revelations than just this and that. In other words, we have nature's communications replaced. We have James Madison's communications replaced. We have all the founders behind them with the communications replaced. And then further, we have James Madison as the president. Then further, with his communications replaced, they still did not have free speech. They declassified this. Plus, nature shows it. But nature shows also that the nature of debate has been contained with self-guided rules of criminally foreign tactically delusions raw quality aspects in nature. One of the reasons they got away with this is because they've had of how the breaching method maintained the names of all the sciences, sports, in other words, including acting, theater, having each age shown sickly distinctly. This adapts because we would have adapted. This breaching method knew that it had to keep roles with itself, also demonstrated by nature, also blamed on other things other than themselves. Also, in other words, this is really why and is how the suburbs, even though they were designed a little bit too narrow, etc. Tactically denatured identity of the grounds, identity relationship to itself, a landscape theater in layers, more and more not realizing because the only means provided to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures, but with the breaching method entrenched. Again, even with overt slavery against our black pupils and against our whites of eyes in all roles. Otherwise, everyone would sense for the breaching method. No one could get to an identity of unity or an identity of independence to speak for legitimately for the species body of individual bodies. We are simultaneously forced by nature's body as all bodies at the same time to value how we are inseparably unity as value. And simultaneously, we're the opposite. We are independence as value. We are a human species body of individual bodies with all group differences in demonstration of that which is generating, not just our species body, but other species bodies also as species individual bodies of a whole bunch of individual bodies with all group differences in generation and demonstration of its own, where and how it is discernible. The identity of all space/existence is the distinct identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible that is inseparable from all parts of all things, individually grouped and then further distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneously, simultaneously too. Show us that one of the things it shows us is there is a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. Where and how we are shown, there are bodies, there are other species bodies, even insects. They're distinct but non-distinct too, and simultaneous. But also, again, that which is neither us nor them, but it's all things anyway. A further distinct identity of hyper-simultaneous nature, therefore. Relativity/hyper-relativity is because it's got three distinct identities of relativity to itself. And it's three distinct parts of itself, are three distinct parts, individual parts of a unified body, like cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall of an individual cell /S, and with the body of life coming through it. This is identity's course. Not these other ones presented to the news where they put sexual rights, for example, over those most people. We have black people's rights of life. Stop. That is inseparable from every subject. That's really why and how, no matter who made them up, what extent they were made up. It's why and how there's a witch trials place right next to Webb House, renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Still, more and more narratives in nature and sense and sensibilities rolls by that. And motivations narratives and nature's behind it. While others has been communicated about, right, then James Madison, our founders, communicated, including and then further George Washington. In other words, who agreed to help them and to use that plan. There are proofs that he had no choice. In other words, but thank God, because it's to get the Constitution unabridged, and why and how we have rights are too numerous to have to list them. And we have declassified how they didn't have free speech, and we have declassified how James Madison's plan is what unfolded to force the Civil War, to attack one aspect of the slavery against everyone sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly too. And but they were way worse than just internationally entrenched, forced monitored conversations that forced also syntactical, therefore physical collusion /S against self and others, specifically to prevent unity, specifically to prevent independence being of any other nature than criminal insidiousness nature, being of any other nature than as a style for that, generated by nature itself, that shows us when we are using systems tactically ulterior from its hyper-native one. That's what our founders, as Native Americans, and as those founders, plural, as Native Americans and as colonists grouped, who then had to go counter-extort the rest of the colonists and the rest of the Native Americans, because there is still entrenched. And further, additionally, where we are ground, for breaching methods that knew and appreciated how we are value/value regression. It remembers our history in some ways better than ourselves. This is where and how these principles regarding black pupils' whites of eyes and James Madison's plan before George Washington, how they are replaced, how there are self-valued rules with use/uses of our founders' words and then of our president's words too, leaving out the breaching method that was entrenched at all locations, areas, and states. Also, that was entrenched with what? Roles having been entrenched. Souls. Forgiveness is to not leave out the breaching method. Everyone was guilty because they had to be. Otherwise, they were sent through their own. That was forced by the breaching method. Everyone would speak for law only as nature as criminal insidiousness. Natures of positive treatments and negative treatments as collusions. Arrays and difference of sides of issues, subjects as topics as framed. Not one has trained. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are about fighting, but by the rules. But the rules have been abridged since some ancient times. We could make hyper positives out of negatives everywhere. And all kinds of people from America to Russia to Ukraine, they agree. And who doesn't agree will have inherent to, active to, progressive to. Their logic, their nature, logic demonstrations of the same thing and means to change their minds hyper peacefully. Because nature wants what we all just can't believe, we all can't fathom. Not because it's unfathomable. We know we all long clear water. We know we all long lack of pollution. We know we all long rest and time and contemplation, tactical interior from these natures of industries and jobs, from a tactically denatured base hyper additionally. There is and has been a torture, extortion, fact cheating nature, therefore physical slavery method upon the people of the countries A through Z. Here, Anthony. That's in other words, and don't stop. The American history doesn't start until we have this principle addressed. In many ways, I tell best boxings. You don't leave out how our founders did not have free speech. How they pretend such is debatable in theater so the kids can see it and think that's a common opinion. The difference is, they say, well, one time they were unified age, and there are others. We hear all they're hurting the differences of the boys, the differences of the girls, the differences of the men, the differences of the women, elderly, veterans, and not because someone's going to kill, because it's someone who's going to sacrifice the country. And we could have people that, in other words, at countries A through Z, we have a human species body of individual bodies being and haven't been used through systems, tactical terror of its own, specifically to measure and to maintain each name of the phenomenon of the names of countries above locations, areas, and states, measured and maintained, only capable of blaming other things, others, ourselves, or sensing anyone starting to do other. For the breaching method, when did anyone have the audacity to speak about crimes, leaving out the predicate acts with facts regarding what witch trials are about? Oh, I didn't know there was a witch trials place next to Webb House. First of all, it's because it's no longer even named Webb House. Now it's named the Webb Stevens Museum. And layers of history and why change and what and the motives and name more names to obfuscate, to worse than obfuscate. Also, sense and sensibility, just sense for the breaching method, self-valued roles with other communicated for James Madison, for our founders, and they communicated. Principle, just as black pupils, whites of eyes, do see. In other words, so the reason we have wars is because locations, areas, and states force all individual voices, no matter if they're therefore leaders too, no matter how powerful they get, a good leader could become. Any grouping of countries, while locations, areas, and states are still being used, have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence / hypercriminally foreign influence. That's why how they had sickly, distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies, not just criminal foreign influences, but those crazy laws against everyone, but hypercriminal foreign influences. This is deeper than the suits and ties, counters, and exceptions used remotely as an array too. And the tactically denatured suburbs, let alone, and then the suburban / urban, and the bridge between that and the straight up urban. Measured and maintained, the suburbs were designed for nature as an tactically denatured identity of grounds, identity of relationship to itself. To cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and nature's means to try to overcome that, which effectively were our means to employ people to roles with criminally foreign influence / hypercriminally foreign influence, natures of industries. That's why our founders had to leave slavery entrenched. No one has the right to vote for that. We're supposed to get the Constitution unabridged and free speech. Appreciating why and how we have rights that are too numerous to have to list them. Let alone, too, while they have the prisons and the state corrections offices, state correction, judicial offices, and exceptions to it, like next to it, different natures of conjunctions to it, involved with the predicate acts with facts method /S. But as the /S part, forgiveness, so you guys will let us tell on the breaching method and have forgiveness with people, pretending we're not blaming them for unknown reasons, reasons that aren't recorded. On a mass scale, due process has been prevented. On a mass scale, they are stacking upon the predicate acts with facts method that measures and maintains other communicated about the value of branches of government as their difference of guilt roles with the breaching method, or the other countries, or the overt criminal enterprises, or the private ones. In fact, that it's originally and still names at all sides of cases, criminal and civil, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, not even involved with those cases, involved with those names and cases, involved with the same sequence shifts out by all sides of cases, their lawyers, executives, family members, neighbors, the news, the same thing with the courts and the police forms, their sources and interbranch families and people tied to them. Same time with names next to body dumping spots. In other words, killed, the killers, all that. The conclusions right on Facebook too, recorded. Not the way you guys say, oh, this is a crime and this is recorded and we'll solve it there. It shows that all sides of criminal and civil cases, in the judicial branch offices and the corrections offices next to it too, all kinds of natures and methods of organized crimes, identity theft, fraud, slander, styles, needs, and nature, because of the original identity theft, fraud, slander method, even against James Madison. So they get people there, and they don't provide writing on a mass scale. They make confessions. They switch arresting officers' names. These are people from Connecticut involved also with the court next to the World Trade Center, right before it, the Ninth Circuit Court, and names on both sides of that case. Whole bunch of people tied to Central Connecticut State University and involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and people from Wethersfield, Connecticut, and involved with Joe DeMauro, like John DeMauro and Paul DeMauro with Valley Crest Street and other people, I don't know their names, involved with a whole bunch of people like with guns, crimes, drugs, medicines, crimes, overt criminal enterprises with grammar school kids and middle school kids that aren't even in the same classes. They're involved with identity theft, fraud, including with the news and medical. And these are people involved with foreign and domestic medical families, ones with badges and gavels, clicks on off Harvard Hospital, and as the people involved with the businesses and houses next to it through time, who have been collusion / putting fake transcripts in databases, acting tied to that, acting tied to predicate acts with facts. No. Connecticut's Channel 3 News attached me to fake conversations with themselves and others. They brought up a whole bunch of subjects at once in the fake conversations. They put in fake locations with themselves and with me. And other people they attached to fake and changed communications, including about the World Trade Center attack. People that were I was an observer in the World Trade Center attack in the court next to it, right before the attack in the Ninth Circuit Court in Manhattan, New York. Before that, it was recorded. People before the attack, people involved, I didn't know their names. People involved with an as former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and family members and neighbors were involved with West Hartford locations, New Britain locations, with people that have been involved through time, all along from Wethersfield Judicial Branch offices next to it and the Wethersfield Corrections offices next to it, involved with predicate acts in my area a bunch of ways. Predicate acts with facts, methods still, identity theft, fraud, slanders, a whole bunch of people from other areas that they take your picture of them walking by you and like different tricks, the same ones that did that at campuses. These are people involved with fake transcripts refusing to get on writing since before the World Trade Center attack. Increasingly, there are doctors that fake conversations with me too. Connecticut's Channel 3 News attached me to fake ties to doctors as a kid at all, and conversations with doctors and diagnoses that weren't at all as a kid, with the people with their own foreign and domestic medical families, their own kids involved with sexual medical offenders, the kids first forced. They had roles at the same time forcing that WFSB, and more then and now. They still attach me to fake conversations about my family members too. Like try to make it look like put like a novel they're writing, fake things at Harvard Hospital. Whole bunch of people at Harvard Hospital involved with a house near me, involved with who they said is their cousin, Phil Collo, who's one of the ones involved with whiting forensics. Also with the Joshua Julian, who they also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Also with people tied to them with a Robert Rodriguez. Also involved with people tied to him, confessed roles with home break-ins and wire crime acts and methods with police. And I found that those police also attached me to fake conversations with themselves and being at the police. I didn't even go to the police station as a kid. And then when they arrested me after that, or before that, I don't know whether they just took my fingerprints. I had no conversations about anybody. In other words, as a kid, the kids who did go down when they wanted me to go to the police station, didn't go to speak with them. In other words, I didn't even have communication with a Chris Walters in a car. Increasingly, people tied to a Kerr family and a Chris Walters have also Officer Jerry Miller has digital crimes with Wethersfield Police. People involved with retired police chiefs, like a police chief Cintron, and their family intimate ties with the same house /S near me. Involved with predicate acts with facts at and between campuses, identity theft, fraud, slanders. Increasingly, people I didn't even have classes with involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, acting tied to the people putting predicate acts with facts in databases and interbranch. The Britain Superior Court has been stacking predicate acts with facts. They have victims advocates involved with overt criminal enterprises, plural, and private ones, and sexual and medical offenders of kids, forced, and while they pretended they pretended fake motives being for victims. They have types of abuses of people, self-valued roles with the breaching methods, preventing anyone real rights. So why would they need rights because of a type of thing? In other words, we should leave out black people's whites of eyes. White and black are simultaneously slandered. Any little kid knows this because they have black people's whites of eyes. But they think, and then they think more and more. The listening, you guys came through campuses that have communicated other for James Madison, for our founders, than they communicated. We're supposed to, in other words, we're supposed to appreciate where and how, on a mass scale, now people hunger and thirst across the earth, tactically denatured through natures of jobs, industries. We never addressed how our founders communicated about that either then. No. We're supposed to address how our founders didn't even have free speech, let alone ourselves, black people. And ourselves distinctly, if I'm not Native American, but everyone's hyper native. And nature itself is going to show you. The 3/3 of our founders are Native American, but then coupled with the colonists behind James, and as James Madison, his plan. That's another third. That's another third, because there's also the rest of them that didn't agree. And everyone else doesn't know what to do, and no one's telling the truth for even our founders. The principles of our republic, of its campus system, that needs pantheism, and to see through even its own ism, to stay led by that which is true always, that which does not leave out the smallest finite detail, the value of what came first. Things that are, the nature debate contains all kinds of tricks to prevent, the significance too, not just the black people's white divide, but then, of Native Americans. We would have come to realize there's a breaching method against every single person since before modern religious messages were born. The campus Marseilles, the republic for which we stand, from off its locations, it became a criminal. It became influenced to hyper additional collusion /s. Increasingly incapable of affording to be short words, let alone their protraction. By its edifice and by its function having been revealed relative to that which is true always, as itself, not a truth used to lie, a truth used to screen lies, screen motivations. You guys have motivations A through Z with the breaching method, because the breaching method assigned you rules right through your schools too, to blame other things, others, ourselves. Right for things that our founders' communications told you to blame on a human factory nature breaching method. I can tell you a whole bunch of ways that there is recorded that on a mass scale, originally and still, there are all kinds of scams under the guise of being or having been due process. We know Americans don't have due process on a mass scale. Even when they're right and they catch people for crimes, they increasingly had collusion /s, even with the names next to the body dumping spots. See, that girl reportedly dragged to her death from next to Harvard Hospital. She's involved with the people with the businesses, houses there, or temporary driving by, in other words, and with the Mike Violet, involved with the intelligence families on my street in the past, and people associated with them still, with the police switching names, forging names, refusing to get on paper since before the World Trade Center attack. It's with the courts too. Harper Courts and the Britain Superior Court, Connecticut District Court. They affected requests for help and confessions to me. Also with former Director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their lawyer names next to it in conjunction to his lawyer's offices, and that guy. And how people make nonverbal confirmations of other people's confessions, where those confessions are directed by nature itself too. And then further by a breaching method using that. There's a means to discern this. That's what's discernible just with the black people's rights of eyes being and having been replaced. I'll pace. See, the breaching method showed you guys principles, tacticals, and everyone learned from those principles. Well, that's where everyone. But those are principles not led by the principles that are, like, for example, how we have two eyes and other species' bodies do. How and why? Where we showing that we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. And the same color is the color white, the colors white and black. We have had the inseparable by per nature from the subject of what slavery was about. And our founders told us to leave, not to blame it on the breaching method that was entrenched before America's founders were even born. And all had roles with that. Otherwise, that body was sentenced. That's why that's why James Madison had the counter extort, forced everyone to fight against slavery, even though it was entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies, and he still didn't have free speech yet. James Madison's plan forced the American Revolution. James Madison's plan forced the Constitutional Convention. James Madison's plan forced the Civil War. A breaching method also did, though. A breaching method came from some ancient times and also caused everything that A through Z blamed on even on A through Z, even when they did it right correctly. It was still done wrong exactly the way the breaching method wanted it, leaving itself out, leaving things it did and the relativity of that blamed out and, changed, fake. So on a mass scale, we do not have mandated law. And so the news and the interbranch at the same time steal our identities, attach us to fake conversations and collusions too, private tied to them. I can't get them on paper either. Harvard Hospital won't respond to me. They don't respond with the internet, not for we're not going to respond to the internet. They put fake audio and video transcripts at their locations. They have wire and mail crime acts and methods, including the Wethersfield police did that. And then when I was an adult too, as ones involved with the Saudi attackers, people with the names Mendez, involved with the names DeMoro and Scalora and Cololo and Julian and others with the digital and Robert Rodriguez was made a confession, then confirmed on Facebook. I didn't respond to him the first second. Only times I saw him 2 times on my street. I knew he was being used to plant evidences because I recorded much more when I recorded people since I was a kid planting evidences. There are connections between people next to the campus, each of the campuses I went, as people involved with the World Trade Center attack with a whole bunch of different countries and the departments at Central Connecticut State University in the Brick, Connecticut. These are also people involved with my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Pruzzi. I never had a personal conversation with him. He tried to make it look like a fake exception. It was in demonstration. The same thing he just said to do them amazed that Joe DeMoro did. Only time I ever saw Joe DeMoro in my class there. I always had manners and was only polite to anyone in the class. And I never had problems with anyone. Only time they wrote a problem, it was started not by myself. In other words, and they did that to put fake things and change things with people from off campuses too, no, because there are people from other countries, but also hyper foreign, where how these are families also next to the campuses intercities, planting and having planted insidious, little tricks on a mass scale, with little roles with people where and how, and really why. You're going to be walking by, someone's going to say, hey, and they're standing there. In other words, and even if you say something, nothing, they're just going to put what they want. They don't say anything. They attach you to fake being at the police station as a kid and then as an adult, as Wethersfield police too, involved with World Trade Center predicate acts, a whole bunch of other departments with them, and news locations and their sources, also at corners of streets, who disbelieves. Let's get them on paper, one name in sequence. Please, Judge Napolitano, get them get the Wethersfield police and the courts onto paper for the principal child abusers' confessions and other names brought up, and what I caught them hiding by putting fake and changing what's recorded How I caught them getting away with that. What's the name of the two? Of the guy who was reportedly was a roommate of a Ray Kalol, is involved with people next to Fox Connecticut News, which is the spots next to the state capitol. And at the state capitol has something to do with the people from other areas involved with predicate acts with backs on my street and on all sides of my house and on all sides of their houses per method. These are people also next to the park. Joe Aiello is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with gun narratives by guns as his roles with kids, with men and women involved with guns with kids, and overt criminal enterprises and drugs and medicines crimes with kids, and people with the businesses and houses next to Harvard Hospital, involved with a whole bunch of names there, putting fake transcripts, planting sequence shifts. In other words, let's get them on paper, one name and sequence, and then you'll see who disbelieves. I've been asking since I was a kid to get them on paper. They make police reports and confessions. Increasingly, these courts have collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and now terrorists enough that we could all discern this. They have been changing what's actually recorded. There's only 3 branches of government. Get them out the paper and with their intelligence. Yeah.